Welcome to AMVSR LLC, the leader in fully automated multiple voice speech recognition for the courts, quasi-judicial hearings, congressional hearings, depositions, and arbitrations, and much more. During this Federal Communications Commission hearing demo, I will be adding some voiceover comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear two items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that would make spectrum in bands above 24 gigahertz available for flexible use wireless services, including for next generation or 5G networks and technologies.
ASR Transcriptor auto-transcribes directly into OpenOffice, a free program to download to your PC, Mac, and from Apple Store and Google Play, the companion app. As soon as there is a recess or adjournment, this same document you will get. So please note the line numbers when you order real-time viewing, as we use the internet to capture your streaming audio, video, and send back much like what you are witnessing now.
This is your agenda for today. The first item will be presented by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Office of Engineering and Technology, and it is entitled Use of Spectrum Bands Above 24 Gigahertz for Mobile Radio Services. And John Wilkins, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
It's my pleasure to introduce the Spectrum Frontiers Report and Order and further notice of proposed rulemaking.
Note that right now, each time a new speaker addresses the record in the colloquy mode, it takes a few seconds before the transcript appears. But as microprocessing doubles every 2 years, this delay will no longer be an issue for some.
Comment on making an even greater number of additional bands available using the same flexible framework. The world is pushing forward to the next generation of wireless connectivity, generally referred to as 5G. The item before the Commission today establishes our leadership position in this transition by continuing in the tradition of innovative spectrum policy that has supported the tremendous success of wireless services in the United States. Through this action, the Commission will put flexible rules in place for millimeter wave spectrum.
Clients will be able to view the transcript on their smart devices. Just visit their website and download the free app into your smart device. Only those clients who order the service will be able to see the transcript.
Trader, Brian Regan, and John Schaubel. Michael Ha from OET, and Jose Albuquerque from IB. It's been a true team effort across a lot of the bureaus of the Commission. And in addition to the team here, I also want to thank the staff from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, the Enforcement Bureau.
There are over 2.5 million entries in the Universal English Dictionary. Every spelling is correct. Even strange names of places and people seem to come out most times accurately.
Commissioners, this report and order on FNPRM establishes service rules for frequency bands above 24 gigahertz for mobile and other uses, and proposes additional bands for further consideration. Specifically, it adopts license service rules for three bands: 27.5 to 28.35 gigahertz, the 28 gigahertz band; 38.6 to 40 gigahertz, the 39 gigahertz band; and 37 to 38.6
Only
gigahertz,
a very
the
small
37
fraction of
gigahertz band.
steno-based and
It
voice
also
writer
authorizes
recorders
unlicensed
and PC
operations under Part 15 of
keyboardists
the
love this
Commission's
kind of
rules
challenge.
in the 64 to
But as
71 gigahertz
digital
band.
audio and video
The
will
item adopts a
surpass
flexible
all
licensing,
expectations
service, and
within
technical
3
rule
years
framework
using 5G
that applies to the bands
technologies.
in the report and order
These
and serves
vocations
as the
will
foundation
disappear,
for the
leaving
bands
only
raised in the
digital text
FNPRM.
editors to finalize
The 28
transcripts,
gigahertz band,
especially when it
39
is sworn
gigahertz
testimony.
band, and the 37.6 to 38.6 gigahertz portion of the 37 gigahertz band will be made available using geographic area licensing. The 28 gigahertz band will be licensed on a county basis, and the other bands will be licensed on a partial economic area basis. The 28 gigahertz band will be licensed as two 425 megahertz channels, while the 37.6 to 40 gigahertz band will be licensed in 200 megahertz channels. The 37 to 37.6 gigahertz band segment will be shared on a coordinated co-equal basis between commercial and federal users. This item sets in place a structure with defined rights that can then serve as a foundation for collaboration among interested parties on a sharing mechanism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'm about to ask a question that might seem odd coming from this side of the bench, particularly since this body stands minutes away from taking, and I quote, a significant step towards securing the nation's future and the next generational evolution of wireless technology. Mr. Chairman, just what is 5G? Today's vote is both a monumental step as well as a perfect example of why I am so excited about the direction we are headed when it comes to spectrum policy, breaking away from the conventional model of exclusive, indefinite licenses, innovative sharing rules for bands and in frequencies we never dreamed possible. All of this affirms just how serious we are about meeting the communications bandwidth needs of our citizens. But I am willing to bet that your answer to the question, what is 5G, would be different from the person sitting next to you and the next person and the next. Nonetheless, what we do know and can all agree is that the next wireless evolution promises to fundamentally change the way we live, interact, and engage with our communities. Indeed, there is seemingly no limit on how what we refer to as 5G could impact our everyday existence. A refrigerator that not only alerts you to a near-empty egg carton, but automatically adds that item to a virtual shopping list, enabling a delivery to your door by week's end without any action from you. Or a piece of equipment in a factory that automatically pings a repair person at headquarters about a potential malfunction well before the machine shuts down. Or remote surgery being performed in the Alaskan bush by a preeminent surgeon thousands of miles away. Some of our cities already have smart technologies, such as New York City's Link NYC free public Wi-Fi network, which I had the pleasure of seeing in May as part of my Connecting Communities tour, or Boston's solar-powered benches that not only charge gadgets, but also monitor air quality and sound levels. And all of this will become even more prevalent in a 5G world.
Today, the United States leads the world in the deployment of the current generation of wireless technology known as 4G. While we are home to less than 5% of the globe's population, we have 1/3 of all 4G subscriptions worldwide. So far, so good. But if we want our wireless future to be bold, we need to do more than rest on our 4G laurels. We need to focus on what's next. And 5G services are poised to provide speeds more than 10 times faster than today's 4G networks. The increased speeds of 5G service will change the ways we communicate, multiplying the ways we use video as images increasingly replace what is done today by text. The reduced latency of 5G service will clear the way for augmented and virtual reality, creating new teaching tools and entertainment experiences. And the lower energy demands of 5G service will lay the groundwork for new efficiency gains from the Internet of Things. The race to 5G is on. The world's wireless economies are busy planning for 5G. South Korea and Japan have plans to deploy 5G services by the times they hold the Olympics in 2018 and 2020, respectively. And to meet these goals, carriers in these countries are already conducting field trials. Earlier this year, the European Commission announced work on a 5G action plan in addition to work that they are already doing with China, where 3 of the nation's ministries have jointly established a group to promote the development of 5G services. So even though standardization is still underway and commercialization may not occur until the end of the decade, work is being done worldwide. I saw some of this myself in our own backyard when I spent time at the National Institute of Standards and Technology last week. We have cutting-edge millimeter wave research that is taking place with assistance from both academia and industry. We are making real progress. But for 5G technology to truly take off and for the United States to win this race, we need spectrum, and lots of it. So I'm pleased to support our efforts today to authorize mobile use in the 28, 37, and 39 gigahertz bands, Collectively, this represents over 3 gigahertz of spectrum that will become available for licensed use. We also have a cut for unlicensed, or what I call the Wi-Fi dividend, in the 64 to 71 gigahertz band. And these airwaves can be combined with a swath of unlicensed spectrum that is nearby, meaning new and exciting possibilities for WiGig innovation.
A decade ago, the smartphone didn't exist. Today, over 70% of American consumers cradle them in the palms of their hands. And an artist like Adele is subjected to intense scrutiny when she uses a flip phone to say hello in a music video. Not long ago, cars, appliances, and other machines were analog islands unto themselves. Today, we are at the dawn of the Internet of Things, with 15 billion Internet-connected devices and 50 billion expected by 2020. Many years ago, wireless was a fraction of all IP traffic, and only spectrum below 3 gigahertz was thought to be suitable for mobile. Today, the forecast is that wireless devices will account for 2/3 of all IP traffic, and the vistas for spectrum extend up into the triple digits. Changes like these are forcing everyone to rethink the wireless networks in this country and to start planning for our 5G future. Now, thankfully, American entrepreneurs and innovators are rising to meet the challenge of our highly interconnected world. They are investing in the research and development necessary for the United States to extend its leadership in the mobile space to the next generation of wireless technologies. I've seen these efforts firsthand, from Samsung's 5G research lab near Dallas, Texas, to Intel's demonstration of its millimeter wave technology here at the FCC's headquarters. And just this week, Verizon completed the technical specifications for its 5G deployment, which should help accelerate the technological push forward. Now, today, the FCC does its part to pace the wireless revolution. In this order, we open up over 10 gigahertz of high-band spectrum for innovative mobile use. In the further notice, we start the process of bringing perhaps twice as much online. And on many of the most important policy questions, we supply answers that should allow American consumers to enjoy a mobile experience that is the envy of the world. I'd like to highlight this morning just a few of those decisions. First, I'm glad that we are including a number of additional spectrum bands in our further notice. In particular, I'm pleased that we now have the votes to examine the 12,500 megahertz of spectrum in the 24 gigahertz, 32 gigahertz, 42 gigahertz, 70 gigahertz, and 80 gigahertz bands. Commissioner O'Reilly and I urged our colleagues to include those bands in last year's notice. In our view, the Commission should have teed up as many bands as possible and let innovators and entrepreneurs tell us what might work. Happily, persistence has paid off. Today, the Commission speaks with one voice in promoting the potential of those 12,500 megahertz of spectrum for flexible mobile use. Likewise, I want to take a minute to thank my colleagues for agreeing to expand the further notice to include spectrum bands above 95 gigahertz. Now, getting to this point was no small feat. Petitioners asked the FCC to adopt service rules for these bands years ago. In the meantime, other countries, as well as companies here in the United States, have been looking for ways to put the spectrum to more productive use. I've been told that our lack of service rules might be holding us back. Now, one might think that these bands are way out there, spectrally speaking, but that's not a reason to artificially restrict them. Again, let's get the spectrum out there and let the engineers help us decide. I'm happy to report that we were able to reach a compromise that puts these bands at long last on the table. Second, I'm glad that we are now placing an even greater emphasis on fostering innovation and investment in the millimeter wave bands. For instance, the order abandons the so-called hybrid licensing scheme that the 2015 notice proposed for the 37 gigahertz band. In my view, that complex regime would have inhibited investment and innovation. We also appropriately leave behind the complicated performance metrics proposed in the 2015 notice. Back then, I urged my colleagues to include questions about more straightforward approaches. And now, the order adopts those simpler, well-established methods of determining whether licensees are putting their spectrum to use.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a longer statement that I'll submit for the record, but I want to make some points. After much hard work, the item before us is in fairly good shape and earns my general support. But we are at the early stages of development. Most industry participants believe that the next generation, or 5G networks, will incorporate millimeter wave spectrum to achieve the capacity, speed, and latency needs of America's wireless users. Not only will these frequencies be used to provide data-intensive applications such as advanced video downloads and gaming capabilities, but will also be used with our current 4G deployments to incorporate the vast and expanding Internet of Things. Today, the U.S. becomes the first country to allocate spectrum for the next generation wireless networks. I've stated repeatedly, and my colleagues agree, that we must maintain our position as a world leader in wireless innovation. Other nations, such as South Korea, China, Japan, seek to challenge our status. We are ideally situated to usher in the next wave of wireless technologies based on our preeminence and experience gained in deploying 4G technologies. We are solidifying this leadership role by opening up the 28, 37, 39, and 64 to 71 gigahertz for mobile use. I appreciate that the item, as promised to me, seeks comment in the further notice on 7 new bands to open up for additional wireless uses. However, I am sure that no one will be surprised that I will continue to push for even more bandwidth, especially those that are being studied in preparation for the next World Radio Communications Conference. While I've been critical of the events that I witnessed at Work 15 and its decision to not study certain frequencies, such as 28 gigahertz, this does not mean that we should ignore our future needs. A main role of the Commission is to provide the necessary spectrum resources and then let the private sector take technology to meet consumer demands. In the same vein, we must also provide a regulatory environment that offers licensees necessary flexibility and certainty to allow investment, innovation, and deployment of next-generation systems. While I'm supportive of the actions we take today, there are several licensing issues that, in my opinion, would have benefited from further consideration and I suspect we'll be revisiting in the future. These include licensing in the 28 gigahertz band by counties as opposed to larger market areas or such as a P, which has been rejected by almost everyone in the record. Allowing shared use in the lower 600 megahertz of the 37 gigahertz band between the federal government users and multiple commercial users, and concerns that the operability requirement for the 37 to 40 gigahertz. How fixed satellite service earth stations should be protected and how they should be sited going forward, and the potential direction of some sharing proposals raised in the further notice. I must dissent, however, to 2 areas. First is the spectrum aggregation limits imposed in this order and the mobile spectrum holdings discussion in the further notice. Generally, I oppose spectrum caps in favor of the free market, but in this case, it makes absolutely no sense to impose any limits. We do not have a consensus definition of 5G, as my colleagues have highlighted. Finalized standards, a full understanding of what services will be offered, or any idea of how much spectrum is needed to achieve the capacity, speed, and latency goals for particular spectrum bands. But we adopt this foolish policy anyway. Although improvements have been made since the item was originally circulated, I also cannot support the security section of this order requiring a high-level statement of every licensee's security plans. While I fully support secure networks, wireless providers have every incentive to ensure the soundness of their networks. A lack of security measures, or even worse, a security breach, results in a loss of subscribers, which is not a successful business plan. Therefore, I do not believe that this reporting requirement is necessary or all that helpful. I also cannot support the delegation of authority to the Public Safety Bureau to release an NOI seeking comment on the security implications and solutions in future 5G networks.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration today an item on the ongoing technology transitions. Evolution in wireline networks have not been measured in clearly defined generations, but it's clear that we are in a momentous and powerful time of change. And the item before you seeks to provide regulatory clarity for these technology transitions and to remove obstacles that might impede them. It proceeds in 3 parts. First, a declaratory ruling that finds incumbent local exchange carriers are non-dominant in their provision of interstate switched access services. Second, a report and order establishing a framework for evaluating discontinuance applications related to technology transitions under Section 214 of the Communications Act. And third, an order on reconsideration addressing a small gap in the interplay between our copper retirement and discontinuance rules. The resulting item eliminates obsolete requirements and modernizes other rules to help the nation's communications infrastructure get from here to there in a way that safeguards and promotes competition, consumer protection, universal service, and public safety and national security. It is, as some has said, a values-driven transition. With me at the table are Carol Maddy from the Wireline Front Office, Dan Kahn from the Competition Policy Division, and also from the division, Peter Saharko and Megan Capasso. And if I may mention that Peter has very kindly timed the birth of his next child to be slightly after this meeting. His wife is...
How slightly?
She's 37 weeks. So if he has to leave in the middle,
right.
You'll know why. I thank my colleagues at the table for their efforts in producing the item, as well as Christine Fargetstein, Michelle Burlove, Heather Hendrickson, Brian Hurley, Alex John, Kathy Zima, Alec McDonnell, Ziad Sleem, and others in the Bureau. And also, we are grateful to the contributions from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau, and the Disabilities Rights Office of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau. Megan will now present the item.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners.
Good morning.
Technology transitions demand regulatory transitions, meaning the Commission must adapt to new realities while ensuring that our fundamental values are preserved. The proposed actions we present for your consideration today are aimed at promoting those values. First, we propose to grant U.S. Telecom's petition for a declaratory ruling and remove the outdated designation of incumbent carriers as dominant in the legacy switched access marketplace. The proposed declaratory ruling would find that inter-carrier compensation reforms have divested ILECs of market power over these services. Second, the proposed report and order would adopt an updated approach for Section 214 discontinuance applications, involving a transition from a legacy voice service to a new technology, whether IP or wireless. This framework would establish clear standards for what is necessary to be eligible for streamlined processing, which will accelerate approval of these applications. It would also promote speedy technology transitions while protecting our core values. However, applicants will be free to proceed under the traditional 5-factor approach if they so choose. Under the proposed framework, applicants must certify or show that an adequate replacement exists in order to be eligible for automatic grant. The order would adopt a 3-pronged adequate replacement test. To be eligible for streamlined treatment under this test, an adequate replacement service must 1. Offer substantially similar network performance and service quality, 2. Ensure that critical applications remain available, and 3. Guarantee interoperability with key applications. To satisfy the first prong, an applicant must demonstrate that at least one service provides substantially similar network performance as the service being discontinued, substantially similar service availability, and coverage to the entire affected geographic service area.
So the Commission just approved 2 items that together capture 2 of the core responsibilities of this agency. 1, facilitating technological progress and unleashing all the benefits that come with that. And secondly, preserving the enduring values that, as I said before, those who build and operate networks have always had to American consumers as technology advances. By approving the Spectrum Frontiers Order, the United States becomes the first country in the world to identify and open up vast amounts of high-frequency spectrum for 5G networks and applications. This is the most significant step yet to enable high-speed, high-capacity, low latency wireless networks that will improve our lives in, as we were discussing today, myriad ways, many yet unimagined, and unlock countless innovations. By approving today's tech transition item, we're updating our rules to reflect changes in the market and the speed of that evolution to move to faster, better networks, while at the same time reaffirming core principles that I think I dubbed when I first came in here the network compact that exists between those who operate networks and those who use them. When communications networks advance and evolve, new opportunities open up for American consumers. That's why I'm pleased the Commission has taken these significant steps to advance our broadband future. So be happy to respond to any questions, and since normally I have to egg Todd on from the peanut gallery to ask a question, we'll start with you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Sir.
You needn't egg me on this one. Moments ago, I was attempting to talk to some people who came to attend the meeting and have concerns about radiation and 5G, and one of your security force intervened, told the guy he couldn't show me the T-shirt that he had wished to display at the meeting, forced him to put it away, and confiscated my FCC-issued ID. Is this consonant with the discussion that ought to be taking place here, and what's your reaction to this action by your staff?
I've just heard about it for the first time, Todd. I mean, obviously this is an open meeting, and I'm sure that if your credentials have been mistakenly taken, you will get them back. But there is a responsibility for everybody who comes here to behave responsibly.
Is side discussion after the meeting's gavelled out behaving responsibly before you're back in the room?
No, I mean, I think I answered the question, Todd. I mean, the fact of the matter is that that responsible activities, you've seen it before here in the commission room, and everybody has a right to come here, and everybody has the right to behave responsibly, and there are people who are charged with making judgments about that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.